Very warm welcome. Hello there, everyone, and a very warm welcome to number 2 in our 3-part webinar series supported by OVHCloud Startup Programme, where we offer some fresh angles and insights for when you're analysing cloud services and making cloud choices, whether you're at the beginning of your startup journey, planning for, or right in the middle of scaling. I'm Shân Millie, the accidental techie and enthusiastic activist for impact innovation. I'll be your facilitator for this conversation. And we're talking today about data and digital sovereignty, privacy and security, and cloud choices for the early stage firm. And just to remind you that we're looking at stuff from where you're sitting, the founding leaders and teams. We're looking at your business models and data strategies. And if Europe is in any way part of your growth or business plan, which aspects of the European way of doing data you should be prioritizing in every aspect of operations, including essential tech infrastructure, and of course, choice of cloud partner. So let's meet our 4 expert panelists. So please meet panelists when I mention your name, if you could wave to let people know who you are. So Ammar Alkassar is former founder, knows what founding's like in cyber, and specializes in strategy and innovation. And one of his pro bono activities is with Germany's GovTech campus, who are prioritizing the development and application of digital technologies and solutions for the public sector. #GovTech, suggest you take a look. Next up, Mariane, whose speciality is in payments, digital ID, data sharing, and data sharing ecosystems for Innopay. Hi, Mariane. Next up, we have Stefan Schäfer, who's a computer scientist, but he's also OVH's product director and represents OVH in Gaia X, which we'll learn a little bit more about shortly, and why we think it should be something on your to-do and to learn about list. And last but not least, please welcome Tati Caldas-Lottinger, who's a senior legal consultant and founding president at International Women in Business Group and ambassador for the Liquid Legal Institute for North Europe. And her specialities are data privacy, security, and AI. Welcome to you all. Thanks very much for joining us. So let's crack on. There's business critical stuff happening right now for firms who want to operate in the EU with any operating models that involve personal data, which is pretty much everyone, right, in every sector. So I want to kick off today with unpacking and demystifying 2 of the real big issues in that category. So the first one's Gaia X, and the second one is the EU data strategy. And Stefan, coming to you first, as OVH's representative on the Gaia X programme, you're really well placed to explain to our listeners and viewers what's the least they need to know about how it will impact their ability to do business or in or with the EU.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So Gaia X, for those who have not heard of it, it's actually an initiative that has been started, driven by the French and the German government 2 years ago, approximately. And the target is to create a European data sovereign criteria catalog, put it like that. So it's not a cloud that is going to be developed by Gaia X, because a lot of people have a little misunderstanding there and expect a cloud coming out of Gaia X. That's not going to happen. But Gaia X developed in the meantime already a large list of requirements and also criteria that can be taken into account and that can help customers or companies that are looking for a cloud solution, software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, whatever, to understand whether this solution is in compliance with the regulations that Gaia X developed in the meantime. Organizationally, Gaia X is a non-profit organization based in Belgium, and we have a lot of country hubs around. So there is a very active country hub in Germany that is running projects that are trying to implement as prototypes the solutions. For example, Catena X is one of the most prominent ones in the IoT automotive industry that are driving this implementation of a cloud solution based on the criteria catalog. The criteria catalog of Gaia X is also created a list of levels. So we have 3 levels of data sovereignty depending on the need that you actually have. And that if you look at, for example, the startup situation, you need to understand as a startup, what is the sovereignty and security and data privacy need that the data that you are dealing with actually has. And based on this sovereignty need or data privacy need, you can select different levels of European sovereignty that have been developed by Gaia X. So Gaia X has in the end defined 3 different levels, and it starts from a, let's say, acceptable low level of sovereignty up to a high, very high level of sovereignty for those that are dealing with very special data. And for example, if you look at the GovTech campus, public sector, governments, they look at very high level of data sovereignty. From a technical perspective, what is actually the outcome after 2.5 years is not just a list of criteria. So there were projects that were implementing the first services and also solutions based on Gaia X, so not only Catena X, but also the foundation itself created this criteria catalog and also implemented a product catalog, which you can access directly on the webpage from the webpage from Gaia X.
Sorry, Stefan, just to interrupt there just for a second. The product catalog, if I go there, what will I actually see? What will that? What will that show me?
So the product catalog is a catalog where providers like OVHCloud or other cloud providers are invited to represent themselves in there, and they have to answer a number of criteria, questions, so that they are then put into one of these 3 levels of data sovereignty that have been defined. And you, me as a cloud provider, I go there and I answer the questions and show the products that I'm providing for the end customer or for a startup. And startup or cloud customers or IT service providers can go into this catalog and can rely on the selection and criteria in that catalog. So if let's say a customer or a startup identified that they need level 2 of data sovereignty, then they can go into this Gaia X product catalog and say, okay, I need a Germany hosted level 2 solution in infrastructure as a service. And then in the ideal world, so it's just in the building now, but in the ideal world, you would go there, you would find your solution, and then you could ideally directly go then to the provider and book your solution. That's in the building. That means it has been the product catalog has been launched on the Gaia X Summit last year in Paris. And now it's also the task of us as a provider, of a solution provider, to bring all our solutions up to life in the product catalog, so customers and everyone who's looking for solutions can rely on a relevant set of solutions in that product catalog.
Okay, so that's really interesting. So that building phase of when I can go and basically check my product, I'm going to make my selection of a provider in line with what the sovereignty, the structures around EU data that we're going to talk about a little bit more next. So when is that building phase, or what I might call a sort of live pilot phase or live building phase, Stefan? When is that going to be completed in its first iteration anyway? What's the goal?
Yeah, the product catalog is actually launched, and now it's a question how fast the providers are putting their solutions in there. So all members of Gaia X have been invited to do that as fast as possible, and we are a founding member, so we are already working on it, and I would assume that in summer there is enough beef to the bone so that you can actually use it.
Yes. Properly. Yeah. So how many members then? And is it pretty much everybody in the cloud provider space that you'd expect, Stefan, who've committed to being part of this?
Yeah, if you look at the members in the Gaia X, so there's basically everyone who is known in the cloud industry is a member of Gaia X. There is this differentiation between founding member and first day member, but okay, that's a minor detail. But if you look at, for example, the American hyperscalers, also Chinese hyperscalers, they're all already members of Gaia X, and they would then also try to implement or put their solution into there. And just since we are talking about European data sovereignty, this is the three-level structure that has been defined. So a purely European company that has headquarter in Europe is only underlying European regulations, etc. That would then be level 3. And for American or Chinese hyperscaler, they still can, for example, fulfill GDPR or C5 or ANISA SecNumCloud requirements, and this would then be level 1 or level 2. But it depends on
Sorry, Stefan. Just remind us again about the level. Level 1 is low risk, medium. Just remind us which way the scale goes.
Yeah, okay, so level 1 is basically giving you the basic data protection regulations that you need, and some architectural requirements like API structure, so that you have an interoperability between the different solutions that you have, and it's fulfilling ENISA cybersecurity scheme levels. Level 2 would go one step ahead, so the service location needs to be in Europe, so that level 1 could also be, for example, outside of the European Union. Level 2 needs to be inside the European Union in the service provisioning. And in level 3, also the headquarter of the company that is running the service would then be required to be in Europe, and everything only underlying European rules.
Super.
We call that, so for example, the Cloud Act 3 level, that is then level 3.
Cloud Act 3. Yeah, thank you so much, Stefan, for that. So Mariane, I mean, one of the reasons that this is necessary and important for many startup founders, advisors and investors to really get to grips with and not be alienated by the language, I'm not a data expert, why should I care? Those types of things that we all know, she's human, we're all very busy, is what you've called the European way of data. And I've just adopted that phrase, Mariane, and I imagine you're quite pleased about that, actually. I'm spreading it wherever I go based on what I've learned from you so far, right? So, but if I just want to be able to brief my board as a founder or part of the founding team of an early stage firm on how that EU way of data will or won't threaten the growth targets that I've committed to in return for the funding that I want or that I've got, what do I say, Mariane? What do I say?
Thanks for that, Sean, and thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Yeah, well, on one side, you're lucky because the message to the board is very simple, because Europe's way is really very simple. It's all about data sovereignty. And yeah, as a startup, of course, you have focus on your products and your services. So let me take 5 minutes of your time now here, why I do think that to use data sovereignty as a key design principle to design those products and services will actually boost your it will boost your growth if you do it correctly. So but let's first talk a bit about the definition of data sovereignty, because there's a lot of speak about it and a lot of people still think about it in a very legal, narrow sense of, oh, it has to do with where your service, where your data is stored, etc. But actually, the definition that we use, and that is also used widely if we talk about the more broader development, is data sovereignty is really about the capability of an individual or organization to have control over their personal or business data, which entails they should be able to know which party holds their data, under what conditions, where the data is kept, and most important, I think, is to be able to reuse that data in other contexts. And in order to do so, the key word here is trust. So I think for organizations on the call, the keyword is trust. How are people or organizations or your partners, how are they going to share this data with you? Why should they? And you see developments, I mean, we've all walked in there blindly. We wanted apps to be free. We want the internet to be free. So we're all guilty. But we now see, we see the developments that people start to think, and they start to notice the downsides. And this is actually what Europe is really ramping up about. So what happened is, for me, that's the European way that you just referred to, Sean. So to really simplify it, and of course this is a simplification, but if you look to the West, to the US, they take from his history, but also their legal house, they take the stance of the individual. So it's your individual right. You have to tick the boxes, which also makes it your individual responsibility as a consumer, that is, to take actions, which kind of leads to the winner takes all situation we have there. Big tech taking all your data, you don't really can do anything about it. Now, if we look more to the East, with which I mean right now, more like the Chinese and the Russian approach, they're very good at data sharing, but their stance is far more a state-led approach. The state has the authority to say what are we going to exchange and in what ways. And Europe is really positioning the European way, which is far more humanistic. We see people as citizen, consumer, and we say, look, basically the people, but also the organizations should be in control over their data. So what they started to do was create a data strategy in 2019, where they kind of laid this whole story. And they are now executing on this data strategy. And right now, they have 5 laws that they really, with which they really are executing this data strategy. It goes too far to maybe Tati will tell a little bit more about it later, but it goes too far to really get to them in detail. But I'll shortly, list them. So it's kind of 2 laws to really manage the current situation, which is the DSA and the DMA, the Digital Service Act and the Digital Markets Act, and they're both, really to manage the current situation. So it's about, what is illegal offline should also be illegal online. So it's about managing large platforms, telling what kind of things they have to do. And then you have the AI Act, of course, where Europe is really kind of, also, I'm not sure if they are leading the way, but everybody is at least, it's a beacon of light where everybody's saying, hey, what is Europe doing here? And then we have the DGA, the Data Governance Act, and the Data Act. And they are more both looking to the future. How do we in Europe want to deal with data? So I would recommend to look a bit into those laws, but to wrap it up really simple, there are basically 3 things you need to remember. And I like to use the quote of Margarethe Vestager from the European Commission here. She said at the beginning of this whole journey, we have the GDPR. The GDPR gave us rights. However, we don't have any means to exercise those rights.
Yeah.
And that is what you have to keep in mind. This whole journey is because of that. So to wrap it up, I think you need to understand 3 things. This is about a fair data economy.
Yeah.
That's what Europe wants to achieve first.
Yeah.
Second, this is about creating a digital single market. They want to use these laws to say, how can we make Europe more robust for businesses? How can we make it easier to share data? That's also where the concept of data spaces gets in. These ecosystems where per sector where you can share data seamlessly because you've made agreements complying to European law. That's the second, single market for data. And then the third is, to come back to your first question, actually, how would this boost your innovation and your growth? Well, there are a lot of things unsure how they pack out, but one thing is completely obvious. If you embed data sovereignty, the concept, and how am I going to give people ownership and stewardship, and how am I going to work with my partners, you cannot go wrong. And I think this could also turn into a unique selling point for you. And that is why, so don't take it, don't take it just as compliance, take it beyond compliance.
Yeah.
That's my
Super.
message.
Thank you very much, Marianne. And absolutely fascinating. As someone who's spent a lot of time thinking about AI and innovation and tech and data value generation in general, but from a non-technical perspective, looking at it from the business perspective, absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. So now when we talk about that digital and data economy, Tati, in your work, you're every day helping firms big and small understand a range of real world business opportunities, risks, and potentially roadblocks arising from being part of that digital or data economy, which again, you know, touches so many businesses, is almost not worth saying because it's about everybody. But thinking about specifically our audience of early stage firms, can I ask you to pick out a couple of examples, potentially one each for opportunity or risk, created by some of the issues and developments that we've just been hearing about as you're seeing them in the real world when you're working with firms and businesses and speaking at conferences, which I know you've just come hot foot from literally hot foot from speaking at a conference just now. Over to you, Tati.
Thank you, Sean. Happy to be here and sharing my insights. Well, I will say that this digital strategy in Europe will be, I will say, more beneficial for startups and small, medium enterprises. For the big companies, I think they are not as happy because, for example, one of the initiatives that Mariane just mentioned, the European Data Act, will greatly impact the way companies manage data. It contains ambitious rules on data sharing between businesses and with governments, as well as provisions on cloud switching that have prompted feedback from diverse industries. So many questions will remain on how the framework will work in practice. But I think for startups, it's a great opportunity because many of the big companies will have to have open source, where small companies will come in and use sandboxes and play with already existing technologies that they can learn from. And it is, you know, my last position was as an acting global data head, data strategy and expert for Ericsson. And for them, I was saying this is troubling because you don't want to share your algorithms. You don't want to share, you know, all the technology that you have invested on. But on the other hand, for small, medium-sized companies and startups, it's a great opportunity. So that would be my positive side in the story. And not a risk, but I think a challenge for small companies will be with compliance. Compliance teams will have to struggle with catching up with the amount of regulation that is coming their way, especially in Europe. So if your company is located, you know, in the European Union, you know, prepare for what is coming down the road in 2 years. If you think that GDPR was hard to catch up with and become compliant, it gave you a taste of what is coming. And I think GDPR, what it did was to help organizations organize their data and have quality data that they can work on and build from. So because you have that part ready, I hope you have that. I hope your small businesses are compliant with GDPR. That will really help you to address the challenges that the new regulations on AI Liability Act, the Data Governance Act, the Data Act will bring, because these are cross-sectoral instruments that aims to make more data available by regulating the reuse of publicly held protected data and by choosing data sharing through the regulation of novel data intermediaries as well. So that will be the thing. Prepare your compliance teams, and small companies don't have compliance teams. The founder will be the cloud compliance officer. That will be the person that will be dealing with everything. Just get ready, read a lot, start drafting your framework. And GDPR has set the basis for these new regulations. So the new regulations will be compliant, you know, in a parallel way with GDPR. So you have, I would say, 30% of the job done.
Okay, just on that. So if we think about an element of compliance with GDPR or GDPR business readiness, let's call it that, because I do think the moment, sadly, actually, the moment that we bring the word compliance in, there is still a temptation, and I see it every day as well, with people to go, yeah, but that's not my job. That's, you know, as you say, if I'm a smaller business, I've probably outsourced that to somebody that's taking care of all of my compliance and risk, or I'm partnering with someone else that's doing it for me as part of the business arrangement that we have. So if it's GDPR business readiness and thinking about that 30% job done, if you could maybe just help us understand with just one example of, in that 30% bucket that you've got done, if you've got that specific example right, and give us that example, then that is going to prepare you. You're going to have a better chance of being able to be Data Act ready. Let's call that Data Act business ready. Can you unpack that a little bit more for us?
Well, I think since data sovereignty laws differ from region to region, security data can be especially difficult with changing geographical locations. So this means that businesses must comply with the laws at home, you know, whatever country you're located, data residence rules, where data is collected, and abide by the laws where data is stored. So I think having a SaaS provider, maybe like OVH, that is based in the EU, will help you harmonize, and is harmonized across Europe. Of course, GDPR will help you with that. But I think the GDPR, what it did was, we know that personal data cannot be shared without, you know, or used or analyzed without consent. But then the Data Act covers non-personal data. So in that sense, you will have a more flexible way of using and analyzing and creating analytics. But I think to minimize the challenge with compliance, having a SaaS provider will help you get through becoming more compliant. Because I think, I don't know, but I'm guessing that OVH offers that type of structure that will help small businesses to become compliant with data sovereignty. Did I answer your question?
Thank you so much, Tati. Yeah, and I think again, so many interesting things to talk about further, which we don't have time today, but rest assured, Tati, you're already on my list of to talk and learn with, and you firmly remain there, as with everybody else on this on our panel today. Thank you so much. Sure. So Ammar, you're the founder on the team. Well, there are Tati has also founded the International Women in Business. I'm not disrespecting that remotely, Tati, but Ammar, you've been there and done it with a successful exit, as you've told me, and you're now part of what I'm calling a hot new #GovTech movement. It's new to me anyway, and I think it will be new to lots of people, certainly in the UK. Thinking about our audience then, Ammar, where do you see the opportunities and also those operational risks for early stage firms, including perhaps for those who'd love to have public sector and governmental clients on their roster, including in the EU? Well, let's talk a little bit more about the GovTech risks and opportunities, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. And I had the privilege to see both sides. First, the side of a provider and startup, and then to see as a state secretary and CIO as the procurement customer side, and to see what benefit I could get from young startups. So first of all, just let me support what Tati said. I think there are plenty of opportunities for startups, especially because they can be more flexible with the compliance and the regulations, so they can take more time to fulfill them. I'm completely with Tati saying that you need to have these things prepared very well, but you can start much quicker than probably a large company who needs to have everything regarded to with regards to compliance to be fulfilled before they start their service. As a startup, you can sometimes just start quickly with the service and try and to see what kind of feedback you get from the market before you put in all the efforts on the compliance side. This is something which can give you a real advantage over large companies, and I think startups need to use these opportunity to be able to cope with these competition with the large ones. This is the first thing. If you look at the governmental side and governmental customers, The big opportunities that the governmental customers are much more forced to look at compliance, to look at privacy, at trust. This is for most, at least here in Germany, but I guess for most of the governmental customers in Europe, they are forced to look much more on the security of their data before procuring a service. And this is something you can benefit from, especially if you're in build a competitive product, at least in some parts, to probably large scale providers coming from the US with a different culture with respect to data privacy and other things. So this is something I guess startups need to focus on to make this advantage really turned into some kind of business. The other side is, the challenge is that startups who address the governmental sector, they have to deal a lot with procurement issues, with formal issues, where they have some significant disadvantage compared to larger companies who are very used to all these routines and processes for procurements and so on. So that means that even with the procurement, the startups need to be more flexible, more creative. For example, sometimes they don't need to make a procurement to sell something officially to a government. They can do, for instance, a research project doing the same. And there are great programs, especially in Europe. If you look at the last Horizon 2020 and the upcoming research regimes, they put a lot of possibilities to show innovative technology to customers on a very, very early stage, and that could mitigate a little bit some of the challenges small companies do have. And the other thing is, sometimes it makes sense to partner with larger companies, like OVH, for example, who provide infrastructure service, and it might make a lot of sense to put your creative, innovative technology on top of it and to sell it through regular processes the big companies, the big providers already do have for the governmental entities. So the message would be very flexible, use the flexibility you have as a small company to find creative ways how to attract and to attract the customer and to solve the customer's issue. Probably the last point here, I've just supported a small startup with confidential computing technology, and it's amazing to see how fast a company which is coming from the research side addresses the market in the governmental area, because they fulfilled a need which has been for a long time in the government area. And they said, here, that's what we have. And they're now partnering with all big cloud providers and providing and solving the gap between the gap providers and the customers who need more trustworthiness for the solutions.
Yeah, that's such an interesting case study of opportunity right there, isn't it? Colleagues in OVH, I think that's something that, you know, for future sharing with your startup programs across Europe, because I know it's a very active program that you have going, not just here in the UK and Northern Europe. That sounds absolutely fascinating. Ammar, thank you. So the issues that we're talking about, and hopefully the audiences that we will have both live and on demand later for this particular webinar, cover every business sector, as we've discussed. So, but what I think is interesting is that you've all sort of alluded to in different ways that there are particular sectors where actually some of these issues are, and getting on the front foot and getting business ready is even more poignant. So it's an issue for everybody, but are there particular sectors where you think, if you are in, I don't know, health tech, pay tech, what, climate tech, I don't know, I'm going to ask you, you should be putting this even further up the list than everybody else that we're talking to. So Tati, for you, number one sector, if I'm a startup firm building a business in this sector, this is something where I really need to prioritize. Which sector would you pick of all the lovely sectors that are open to you, Tati?
Well, I've been hearing a lot of SMEs in the past 2 days here in Amsterdam, the conference that I had, and I hear from small businesses, companies with healthcare to creating apps that will localize their pets. And I think the conclusion for me will apply to any sector. And this is that the recent incidents with data leaks and cyber attacks have demonstrated our vulnerability. So every single sector is vulnerable. But moreover, from a business perspective, I think where regulations conflict with your business model, pay attention to your business model. Consider how the sovereign state, the jurisdiction, political processes will affect your business, how the policies will affect your business. At the most extreme, if you have chosen jurisdictions that in direct conflict with your business model, consider changing the jurisdiction or changing that market. I think adjusting your business practices to cope with the situation, such as replicating some of all or maybe all of your business systems, practices, and operations across the data states that you're choosing, is more important than anything, because I think every single sector is affected. So check your business model and adapt your business model to the certain regulatory environment, not the opposite.
Yeah, which is, to be frank, the opposite is the way that most people think, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
I've called it gamifying, game of regulation. They won't catch us, and if they catch us, we can get out of it. I'm not
Do your
tarring
homework
everybody with
before
the
you
same brush.
launch your product. Do your homework.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Ammar, I'm going to ask you to pick a sector. Tati said no. You've asked me to pick a sector, and I'm not going to. But Ammar, I'm going to ask you to pick a sector, please.
I think that is very right to do so. So I think
Yes, I agree.
yeah, because to be honest, we are living in times where data will change businesses in so many industries, nearly in all industries, and will give plenty of chances in nearly all industries for startups to be active and to combine innovative technology with privacy preserving and security related aspects. So I think you can go everywhere. So if you look what kind of industries will be especially aware of trustworthiness and things like on, and where there will be a regulation for that, it's governmental businesses, it's healthcare, for example. This is something which is definitely expected to be regulated by the state. It is defense business, so we're talking since more than a year now much more about defense businesses, and this is also something which is very relevant. So these industries have their challenges, but they're also giving plenty of chances for startups to provide very quickly solutions which solve gaps which are already existing there.
Super, thank you. And you've gone from not naming one to naming four, Ammar, which is fantastic. But coming to you, Mariane, you can pick up one of those four. If I'm not going to make you not talk about.
Well, maybe we can now increase it to 10 then, and I'll tell you why. So thanks, Tatiana. Yeah, it's not good for the panel, but I completely agree with you, and especially with something that Tati said is also inspiring for me, and I think a good message for the startups. It's one of my favorite quotes from Tommaso Faletti, an Italian economist. He said, I'm kind of disappointed with the current business models. They all seem to evolve around ads. And I mean, can't we do any better? If we look at history, we have libraries, we have town halls, we have squares, we have churches. Can't we do any better on the business models? And I think that's the loud, shout out to the audience here. Your startups or early stage, you don't have legacy. Create new business models around it. So I'm completely with Tati there. So in my mind, the age of shameless data hoarding is absolutely over. Maybe not in every investor's room, but in the room of the people and the society, and thus in the regulators' room. So it is, again, it's beyond compliance. Take it as an opportunity, evolve your business model around it. And why I said I'll take it to 10 is I think it does place in every sector. However, yesterday I was at the Data Space Symposium, And the EU has named 10 data spaces that they want to develop with priority.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we have to name any sector, maybe you can look at those 10
Yeah.
and they're listed everywhere in the internet.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
great point. Yeah.
but I mean, that would be my answer to that. And
Okay.
yeah.
Super. Thank you very much. Stefan, pick a sector or not.
Yeah, I mean, there are the obvious ones that we just discussed already, but I agree also with what Mariane and Tati said, because in the end, it can also be, I'm a marketing guy, so it can also be a marketing benefit to say, you know, we are, even though we might not deal with the most sensitive data, but we are still complying with all these regulations, and we are fully in line with European data sovereignty, even though for the moment it might not be required. So, like for government, it's already part of the every RFP process, but it might be also for as we just heard, 10 sectors, but it might even evolve. So if you want to be on the safe side, and if you may want to make a benefit out of it, market it as one of your benefits and say, I'm already fulfilling all the requirements, even though I'm ahead of time, maybe.
Yeah, super. So look, we're coming to the end of the time that we're allotted for this and that we've committed to our audiences. So obviously we did a bit of prep, people listening in, viewers listening in terms of the questions that we were going to ask and in what order, because you'd expect us to get organized to make the most of your time. But panelists, you don't know this, and hopefully it's okay, but I'm going to change our final question now to ask a question around generative AI. And because in the week, maybe 10 days since we got together and talked about what we were going to talk about today, the world's gone bonkers. That is a UK piece of idiom for completely barking mad, in Shân Millie's opinion, for generative AI. Just the fact that I'm kind of going, why are we getting so excited about stuff that actually makes facts up, according to ChatGPT's founder? That doesn't stop the fact that this is the next big thing. Well, it is the big thing. It's here, right? So I'm just going to ask the question, and I'll do it in the same order. Mariane, I'm going to come to you first. Everything that we've talked about today is about understanding and communicating that what you need to know and what you need to do about it for early stage firms around the way the EU is structuring what trustworthiness means for business and individuals and for firms, and what you need to be able to do to make that, at the very least, make your business compliant, at the best, really benefit from it in the way that you've all spoken about, both sides of that coin. What the hell do we do with generative AI and the data that goes in and comes out of that then? Does that just blow all of this out of the water, Mariane? Or what? How would you respond to that?
Well, I'm going to be really vulnerable here. I don't know. What I see is two things. So first, I'm a consultant. Yeah, so I'm helping people embrace all the opportunities of the digital era. So on the one hand, I'm like, there's nothing to be afraid of. My background is in artificial intelligence, by the way. So there's nothing to be afraid of. You know, people were afraid of the train, you know, when they came, and now, you know, so it's a typewriter. It will help us do our business better. However, I think for startups, but for everybody, we have to look at the liabilities of using it. You know that when you use it, all the data that you put in, or I mean, it will be used also. Also, for the outcome that you use, you are also could be liable for whatever you know, put out there. So, and then the third thing is, what kind of puzzles me at the moment is we have regulation on everything. If I want to put a new car on the road, you know, it has to be tested. And now this technology just is there for everybody and nobody knows the dangers. So I think regulators will catch up to that. So not a clear-cut answer, but I think amazing opportunities could be the typewriter of the coming decades. However, yeah, again, if you keep it simple, go back to my one single message to you all. just use data sovereignty as a key design principle. So how are you going to use this? And how are you going to put it to your partners, audiences within your product? And how do you ensure the data sovereignty of the data you use and the biases, etc.? That would be my answer.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's great. I think it's a great thing when people say, I'm thinking about it, but I don't have the answer yet. And I think that's really helpful for the rest of us as well, Mariane. So thank you very much. Stefan, generative AI.
Yeah, in the end, we were talking about data and data sovereignty. And generative AI is more a kind of using the data from my perspective. And it might be a more intelligent way of doing it in the future. But the data that is that is the basis for the intelligence is the same. So I'm fully with Mariane. If you continue to comply to the regulations and also the guidelines that we just discussed here, then you should also be on the safe side for AI.
Okay, Ammar, your comment, please.
Well, I guess so. Every change, every new technology, every regulation gives also plenty of chances for startups as far as they are creative enough to find solutions for the issues which are coming up. So I am in general optimistic there will be at every time great chances for innovative companies that start. And so I think there's a lot of interesting things to be done in the next 12 months.
Okay, and Tati.
Well, I'm glad you asked. Honestly, I presented yesterday about ethical AI, and I think the frenzy about ChatGPT is out of proportion, to be honest. Of course, generative AI is different than when you just single out one single product and that product does one single thing. The problem with generative AI is that can cause, a lot of misinformation for many sectors. It's not just one single thing. It can be a democracy can be taken down. Deep fakes can be created if you don't control what this solution can do. And the ChatGPT 4 that were released 2 weeks ago is putting some guardrails that will not help people to create a bomb, for example. So those things are, I think the purpose of creating an AI solution are different from the use that users give to that solution. And that is a problem. And these solutions need to be human-centric. But the problem is, and that's why we need regulation, is the user, from the user, what is the use that they are giving to these solutions? From the legal perspective, I think with ChatGPT specifically, I think it brings a lot of regulatory legal questions in the IP and copyright laws, for example. Codes generating from ChatGPT are being generated in plain violation of copyrights. So I will say whatever you use to help you be more creative, make the reference. Cite your source. I used ChatGPT, it came with these ideas, but I double-checked the information, and this is what I think, because it can be enhancing people's creativity. It can be helpful, but it can be harmful.
Okay, thank you so much. What a great conversation. I've really thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Learned so much as always. And I certainly hope that you, our audiences, either live today or on demand at a later date, have enjoyed it and got a lot out of it too. So thank you so much to our panelists, to Ammar, to Stefan, to Mariane and to Tati. And hopefully we'll see you next time on April the 20th. We're going to be running another webinar looking at how to support early stage firms in quotes uncertain times. And again, there's a lot of it about. So join us on April the 20th if you can. But in the meantime, thank you so much. And thank you again to our panelists. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
See you soon,
Bye-bye.
Mariane.